In this second part of the Getting Started tutorial for SPSS, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a data set in SPSS and then how to save it. You'll notice what I've done here is I've have a smaller SPSS window than I had in the part 1 of this tutorial to focus on the cells that we really will be using here. I'm in the data editor, and click to make sure you're in the data view window here. Click on that tab, and you know you are if you have vars along the top for each of the rows, or the columns rather, column headings. If we click instead on the variable view tab, you'll notice then at the top name type with decimals, and this will be information that we'll add in a few moments to describe what the data actually report. But instead we want the data view window here, and we see the vars at the top of each one of the columns, indicating that this is where the data will be entered and will be displayed. To enter the first variable, and this will be just a hypothetical data set, 4 variables for 5 students, just to demonstrate how to do this in SPSS. The very first column is going to contain a student identification number. So I'll click on the very first cell here in column number 1, and I'll type in the number 412, then hit enter, and it automatically creates a generic variable name var 00001, which will change in a little bit, and also then it adds on 2 decimals, and the way in which I got from cell 1 down to cell 2 is simply hitting enter to enter into the data. Now let's continue. For student number 2, they will have a student ID number of 243. Student number 3 will have an ID number of 835, and then 436 and 834. So you notice we have numeric numbers, values included here. Now to enter in their name, which will be the second variable, I'll click on the first cell in the second column, Mike, Carol. Then I'll also type in now Greg, Marcia, and Jan. Now you notice something's happened here when I tried to type in this information. First of all, you notice the little icon up here, the symbol indicates with a letter, indicates that it's a string or character information, character or string alphabetic information, as opposed to a ruler, which implies that it's numeric information. But you notice when I try to type in Carol, and I'll click on this cell, and up here shows exactly what's contained, not what's displayed, but what's contained in that cell, and the two may be different. It didn't allow me to include the L. With Marcia, it did not allow me to include the IA. And so it looks like I have a maximum of four characters that I can include for a value for any one of these cases. We'll click to the variable view window, and you'll notice here it started to describe automatically what is contained in the data set. var1, var2, numeric or string. Go under width here, you notice now the default for a string or character variable is only 4 columns. My largest value, Marcia, is going to have 6 characters, so I need to increase that to 6 characters for the width. So I just clicked on that. Once I clicked on that cell, these arrows popped up, and I clicked on the up arrow twice to change from 4 to 6. Now let's go back to the data view window. I'll click on Carol, and what's displayed up here then is CARO, which is entered. I'll just click right after that to put my cursor after the O in this box, and type in the L and hit enter. Now it displays Carol. I'll do the same thing for Marcia, type in the IA, and now I have enough space for all of those names. Now let's continue, and what we'll do in column number 3, create a third variable which will record the sex of the students. And what I'll do is I'll enter in a 1 for female and a 2 for male. Now we could type in the word female and the word male and create this a string or a character variable, but whenever you're creating a variable that could be used for statistical analysis, we always want to enter it in as numeric information. The only variable we should include in character form only are going to be some identification variables. For example, student name, Mike, Carol, Greg, Marcia, Jan. That's not a variable we would perform any analysis on, so it's fine to have that to be a character or a string variable. But for analysis purposes, we would want to include attributes of these individuals, such as sex, as numeric information. Now, what I'll show you in a little bit later on in this tutorial is how to assign the labels to this numeric information. But for right now, we'll put in a 2 for male, a 1 for female, 2 for male, and the last 2 students are also females. The last variable we'll include will be the student age. Click in that first cell of the fourth column. I'll type in 43 and hit enter. This is Mike's age is 42 years. Carol, 42 and enter. 17 for Greg. 16 for Marcia. And lastly, 14 for Jan. And so now we've entered in the actual data. What we'll do in the next portion of this tutorial is show you how to assign information to these data, to these variables. Okay, now once the data have been entered into SPSS, now we want to add information that describes the data so that when we bring a data set up later on or someone else accesses the data set, they know exactly, for example, what variable 3 and what variable 4 and what variable 1 refer to. And for variable 3, what does a 1 or a 2 mean? For variable 4, what do those numbers mean? To do this, what we'll do is click on the Variable View tab in the lower left-hand corner of the SPSS data editor window that we have open. And you notice here, as we mentioned before, it already has included generic names for our variables, as well as indicating whether it's all numeric or a combination of numeric and alphanumeric information, characters or strings rather. But it has not provided much other information that we have here. So what we're going to do now is, first of all, give the variables more descriptive names. Something that when you open it up, you know exactly what that variable refers to. Now, in terms of these descriptive names, a couple of rules I recommend that you follow. Number one is create these variable names such that they have no more than 8 characters. These variable names are to be used solely to identify in a very brief, quick fashion what is included in each column. We'll provide more descriptive labels in just a moment. So, click on that very first cell under name, that's var 0001. Let's change that generic name, and what we'll do is type in instead the name, the variable name, ID, and hit enter. Now let's change the variable name for column number 2, and I'll type in just name. And also then for variable number 3, I'll type in sex, and variable number 4 is actual, their age. So now we have very quick, easy identified names. So keep your names 8 characters or less is my recommendation. Also, avoid using any special characters, and SPSS may not allow you to include special characters such as parentheses, exclamation point, the @ sign, a pound sign, a question mark, equal sign, or a plus sign. Avoid, don't even try to use those special characters, and SPSS may not even allow you to. One special character that you can use, however, is an underscore. And we won't use that in this case, but that is one exception to that no special character rule. The next thing we'll do is now create, we'll change the decimals that are displayed here. Now, we typed in information that are in whole numbers, but you know, for every variable that was numeric, it automatically adds on 2 decimals. Now that's perfectly fine. It doesn't change what's included in the data set. It just changes the display in the data view. What I'm going to do is just click on that cell for decimals for ID, down arrow twice to get rid of those decimals. Everything's a whole number. Do the same thing for sex, and do the same thing for age. So since I don't have any decimals for these numeric variables, I just don't want to display them. And if I click on Data View, you'll notice then that the display is changed. It does not change what the content is, what was added in, it just merely changes how it's displayed here in the Data View window. Let's go back to Variable View, and now let's add in labels, more descriptive labels. In this case, what we'll do is add in the label student identification number for the variable ID. Then we'll type in student name for the second, student sex, and lastly student age. And when I have a variable such as this that is a quantitative variable, I like to include, where necessary, where possible, the units that are used in years, and I put that in parentheses. So now we have much more descriptive information as to what the variables contain. One last thing we need to do, though, to document this data set is we need to indicate what a value of 1 and what a value of 2 refers to for sex. Now for age, when I put in here in terms of student age in years, we know then that 43 years, 42 years, in the variable label I've included what the unit is. And that should be self-explanatory now, what age refers to. But for sex, 1 and a 2 is arbitrarily assigned, in this case by me. So what I want to do now is indicate what values we need to, labels rather, we need to assign for the values for the variable sex. So what we'll do, anytime we have an ordinal variable or a nominal variable, the idea of a categorical variable in general, we always want to indicate what do the numeric values for those variables actually mean. So I'll go to the column for values and come down to the row for sex, click on that box, and up pops up this little blue button. Click on that button, and now I'll type in the value, that's the numeric value 1, and the label is female. Now I'll click add to put it down to my list, and then I'll type in the numeric value 2, and the label for that refers to somebody who is a male, and I will click add. Assuming that is correct and I've had all my labels added in properly, I'll click OK, and now you notice what we have here in the values box there for the variable sex. It starts to display what the first value label looks like. What we can do then easily in the future, if we wanted to check out what those labels are, just click on that cell and then click on the box that appears, and what we notice then is the labels are now displayed. And in case there are any mistakes, I can go back now and modify this at some later date. So we'll go ahead and click cancel. Now let's go back to data view, and you notice here the data is now reported the way, or displayed the way that we entered it in. One of the things that we can do when we have a categorical variable that does have value labels assigned to it is we can actually display in these cells not the numeric value that was entered, but instead display the label. So for instance, I'll come up under, that is going to be under the view menu. I'll come down to this option value labels, and I'll click on the box to turn it on, and now you notice what's displayed now are the labels for that variable. If I click on any one of these cells, what appears up here is the actual value that has been entered in numerically into the data set. I typed in a 2, but it's displaying what labels assigned to that value. Click on the next cell. I typed in a value of 1. That value is still there, but all that's displayed here is the label. Here the value 2 is what I typed in, male is displayed, and for these last two we notice that 1 was typed in, it's still there, but the label female is displayed. So when you turn on display value labels for your categorical variables in the data view window, it doesn't change what was entered in, what is stored. All it does is changes what's displayed. Now I can go back up here very easily now and turn those value labels off if I wish. So let's leave it at this point. So now we've entered in our data, and we've also documented our data. The last thing that we'll do here is save and exit. Now that we've created our data set and documented it, let's now save this data set so it can be used in future analyses. What we'll do is come up to the File menu, click on that to open it up, and then we'll come down to Save, or we could choose Save As. Let's do that. Choose Save As. And what it does is it opens up then your window here where first of all it indicates where it's going to save it, and you can choose wherever you want to save it. What I'll do is I've got right here a folder for tutorials that I've created, so I'll click on that and save it there, and I can also click and add it to the SPSS tutorials, but I keep it here. It automatically gives it the file name Untitled1. Let's change that and create a more descriptive title. And what I will call this is SPSS Tutorial Dataset 1. That's a fine file name. Notice it's going to save it as an SPSS dataset, and the file extension for SPSS datasets is .SAV. So it would be, this would be the name .SAV would be the actual file name internally. What I will do here is simply click on Save, and what is opened up here now, we see in the upper right hand corner, is an output window. And this is where anytime you display or anytime you execute a command, SPSS will display the command, and this is the internal save command that it executed for me in the output window. Or when you execute a command and it returns output for you, such as we'll do later on for statistical analyses, it also will display then that information in the output window. So there really are two separate portions here of SPSS that are open right now. One is the data editor that we've worked in up till now, and now we see the output window that will contain the commands that have been executed in a given session in SPSS, as well as the results of any statistical analyses that we have executed. And we can also then come up here if we so choose under File and then give these output files or documents a name as well, so that we can know exactly what we did and what the output was. So we can save the results, commands and output from any session. I'm not interested in saving at this point, so I'll just go ahead and close the output window. It's asking me, are you sure you want to do this? No, I don't want to save the content, so yeah, I just want to exit. Now that we've saved the data set, and one way which you know you saved it is now instead of untitled1.sav, it has SPSS tutorial dataset 1.sav. So I'm going to simply now come up under File, click on that with the left mouse button, scroll down to Exit, and we're finished with our tutorial.